Hi students, it's Mrs. Burkhart, and I want to go through and show you how to really clean this nice photo of Cheney up, crop it, and bring out the distinction between the edges of him in the background and get a better exposure overall. The first thing that I always do is duplicate the background layer, and to do that I use the shortcut command, Command J. You could also go up to your menu up here and go to Layer, Duplicate Layer. All right, now that we have a duplicate of the background, the next thing that I like to do is see what the computer thinks the best exposure is. And to do that, I go to Image, Adjustments, and then Auto Contrast. I like Auto Contrast better than Auto Levels because Auto Levels will change the color too, and Auto Contrast will just set the lights and darks so that you have a nice range from lightest light to darkest dark. And if I do that and go over here and click on the eyeball, you can see how much it's brightened up this image. All right, the next thing, let's work on this background. It's a little bit distracting, it's uneven, it's gray, it's blotchy, there's lots of dust and dirt specks. So we'll go over here to our toolbar and select the burn tool. Now remember, the burn tool is nested with the dodge tool and the sponge tool, so all you have to do is click on it and go down to the burn tool. Next, use your right and left brackets to select the size brush. I always use the absolute softest brush when I'm burning, and to do that you just slide this slider all the way to the left. All right, now I'm ready. I don't want to go up too close to Cheney at first. I want to just work in the background, and I'm at a 100% exposure and I'm at midtones. So I'm going to just start working out here, and with a fairly large brush, not getting close to Cheney, I'm going to just start darkening, and you can see this is very rapidly going to a nice rich black. As I get closer to Cheney, I need to switch now to a smaller brush using the left bracket, and then I'm going to go up close. I want to make sure that I don't overlap any of his head, arms, etc. I want those areas to remain nice and bright so there's good contrast between Cheney and the background. So I'm going a little bit fast now. You could go a lot slower and really do a nice clean job burning the background. After I go all the way around the edge of him, I can use a little bit bigger brush and fill in this little area that's still left. Make sure you don't go up close to him with a really large brush, or you're going to get a really unnatural looking burned area on the edges of him, just like remember when we did baby hands and the baby would get all orange and funny looking. Well, the same thing will happen here, so we're very careful not to go over any part of Cheney. I can see that I have some light spots. You need to be really careful and get into those tiny little corners, and there, touch it up. Well, I think you get the idea. We're getting a really rich background, and there's still decent contrast between the edges of Cheney's head and that background. Now the next thing I would probably do is brighten it up just a little teeny bit more, and I'll show you why. I still am not 100% happy with how dark the top of his head is. I'd like a little more distinction. So if I go down here to my adjustment layer and click on it, that yin-yang looking symbol, and then go to brightness contrast, I can actually up the brightness. Not thinking about anything other than really the top of Cheney's head. Notice it's revealing some of my uneven burning, and we can go back and fix that. I'm going to click OK. And then a favorite shortcut command of mine is to do Command I. That'll completely fill and block the effect of this brightness in my layer mask. So if I do watch my layer mask over here, I'm going to do Command I. That inverts it. Now I've blocked all of my brightening, and I can go back with a very small white brush, because remember, we're blocking it with black. Now I'm going to go back, set my opacity really low and just sort of touch on the edge. I can kind of click a few times and bring up the tone. You can see it's slightly lightening the edge of his head. I could work also on some of the edges of his shoulders if I wanted that area to be brighter. Just a little bit. What I'm looking for mostly is some better contrast between Cheney and the background. I don't want him to disappear into that background. I'm noticing that I'm getting a little bit of the background coming through, so I'm going to just block that. To see how much of an effect that this has made, let's just turn it off and turn it on, and you can see it's a slight improvement, but it really does help bring out the top of Cheney's head. All right, now the next thing I will do is go back to this layer. You can actually turn the layer above off temporarily, because as much as I like the brightness that this brings to the image, I'm not happy with how bright certain areas are, like the side of his head, the top of his arms. So I'm going to add a layer mask by clicking on the box with the circle in it. And now I have the option of blocking some of these areas. So I'll get my brush, black. I can leave my opacity at about a third, 28, 30, 40%, somewhere in there. Make it a little bigger. And I'm just going to go in and start tapping and bringing down the brightness in some of these areas. I actually want a pretty strong block here and a really large brush because I want to darken. I'm basically blocking, and we're just revealing underneath how dark that is, because I want the emphasis to be on Cheney's face and not so much on his hand. So I'm just blocking and revealing that darker layer underneath. By doing that, though, I'm also revealing the gray underneath. So one way that I can get rid of that is to now paint with white. We don't want to reveal that light gray background in the background. We just want to reveal the tone of his hands and his arms. There, that's looking pretty good. The only other thing I would do to Cheney is I might go in and add one more. So I'm clicking on the very top layer, because when I go to my adjustment layer and add in one more brightness contrast, and I'm just going for his eyes right now, I might brighten it a little bit. Remember, Command I, I'm filling it and blocking the whole thing because I only want to add just the tiniest little bit of highlight in his eyes. Sometimes if you just brighten up eyes or teeth just a little bit, it helps create a focus. And if you were to turn this on and off, you'd see that this is a very subtle change, but it just brings a little bit of life to his eyes. All right, we're about done. The last thing that I want to do is crop this image. There's way too much space out here and on top of his head. So the crop tool looks like stitches over here. You click on it. Make sure nothing is in the width, the height, or the resolution. Keep those open. And then simply start in one corner and pull a rectangle. You don't have to be perfect at first because there are these little handles at the top and the two sides, and they allow you to adjust that once it's been pulled and decide where you want your crop to be. Now traditionally, you don't want a ton of space above the head. That's called too much headroom. But you also don't want to put it right down on top. One rule is that you never want the edge of the page to touch the edge of something. So we wouldn't want this to touch the edge of his elbow or the top of his head. So you either bring it into his head and crop part of it out, or you bring it up above. I'm thinking about the rule of thirds, and this is my focus, the brightest area and his eyes that are nicely on the top third line, maybe a little more. And I'm going to bring this outside of his elbows just a little bit, and maybe even thinking about it being sort of symmetrical. The nice thing is you can go ahead and hit return or the check take a look at the portrait and how you've cropped it, and then go back in your history if you're not sure you like it, and try again until you feel that what you have is exactly what feels right in your crop. There, that feels pretty good. I would go ahead and save this as a JPEG. This is a nice, straightforward portrait of Cheney. Thanks, and I hope you watch another one.